I'm Femi Okay.
I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Today, protests in Iran. What happened while the country's internet was shut off?
We'll speak to people inside Iran for an update. And since several of our community members requested today's topic, we want to hear from you. What questions do you have for our guests? Send us a tweet or join the live chat streaming right now on YouTube.
Hi, this is Jasmine Ramsey. I'm the Communications Director of the Center for Human Rights in Iran, and you're in the stream.
A sharp increase in the price of petrol sent Iranians to the streets this month in anti-government demonstrations that turned deadly and destructive. Protesters burned banks, government buildings, and clashed with police following a November the 15th fuel hike. According to Amnesty International, more than 140 people were killed in various protests across the country. That death toll has been disputed by the Iranian government. Part of Tehran's response was to shut down the internet for several days, creating even more challenges in verifying the extent of the unrest. On Wednesday, Iran's supreme leader said that protests have been contained. He also blamed demonstrations on a conspiracy involving the United States.
So with us to discuss Iran's fuel price protests and the fallout, Negar Mortazavi, a journalist and diplomatic correspondent with The Independent. In Tehran, Sayed Mustafa Khosheshem, a political analyst and professor of media studies. Also in Tehran, Al Jazeera correspondent Dorsa Jabari.
Hello, everybody. It's really good to have you. I actually want to start with a comment from November the 27th from Iran's supreme leader and the reason he felt the protests got underway and who was behind the protesters. Have a listen.
It was a deep, extensive, and very dangerous conspiracy that cost them, the U.S., so much money and effort. They wanted to use an opportunity to carry out this move, which was an act of destruction, arson, murder, and vandalism, under the pretext of a gasoline price increase. They thought that they had found the opportunity and brought their troops to the field. This move was destroyed by the people.
Mustafa, that is one take, a conspiracy, the US is involved, it's a plot. If you were looking at what happened over the last couple of days, how would you characterize what happened? What took people out on the streets?
Well, hello, thanks for having me. Well, let me explain it this way, that protests are different from riots. You know, all throughout the world, when austerity plans come into effect, then people take out to the streets to express their fury and anger and their concerns. We witnessed the same all throughout Europe and in the West following the 2008 economic meltdown. We are still witnessing the yellow vests are out for economic reasons in Paris after 55 weeks. And the same happened in Iran. President Rouhani brought the gas rationing and gas hike, the gas price hike plan into effect in a wrong way. As a matter of fact, I don't think that you would find any kind of economist throughout the world that would support payment of nationwide subsidies, especially for petrol to the whole nation. But what matters here is that President Rouhani did it at the wrong time in a wrong way, actually. For exercising a state decision, you need to go through stages. First is expert studies. In this case, it's been done. And then the legitimacy of the executor of the plan, the one that implements it, it was okay. But the problem here is with the third step, that is developing public support. He took people off guard. People were surprised. Everyone was surprised. And then people took out to the streets to voice their legitimate grievances against this economic policy of President Rouhani that came by surprise. But from a certain point, as usual, the United States and a number of other, opposition forces that have admitted actually their involvement through the opposition media in, abroad in England, at least in London, there have been two TV channels that opposition members who believe in regime change, even some of them through war and force, and they've done so already.
Can I just get you to pause for a moment, because you've brought up so many different issues, and I feel that we can all contribute to some of those issues. Let me just go
Just let me say that they try, as usual, the United States and a number of these regime change guys that are playing into the hand of the U.S., like the MEK, like Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah, they try to hijack the protests. And as a matter of fact, they did that through rioting. And those who held very legitimate grievances against this economic plan, when they saw their security was at stake, they got back home and appeared in pro-establishment rallies.
Just put a pause for a moment, because there are several issues that you're all talking about at the same time. I want other people to weigh in here. Dorsa, so where Mostafa started was that there are legitimate grievances, and perhaps this was not the best economic move at the time and it could have been done better. You were reporting on these protests. How did you characterize them for us as an audience at Al Jazeera, for instance?
Well, I think Mostafa's right. Initially, everybody was shocked. Imagine waking up one morning on a weekend, on Friday morning, November 15th, and finding out the price of gasoline had tripled overnight without any reason given by the government. I think people initially thought that by taking their grievances out on the streets, it would help put pressure on the government to reverse this decision. But once we heard from the Supreme Leader on that following Sunday, we knew that this decision was final. He expressed his support for the government's decision, and he said that anybody who protests and tries to destroy government buildings, he described these people as thugs and hoodlums. And then we heard within a few hours from the Intelligence Ministry, who said that the words of the Supreme Leader are final and that they will do everything they can to bring security and stability back to the country. And then the Monday of that week, we heard from the Revolutionary Guards. They also issued a similar statement saying that they are now going to go out in full force and restore order in the country. I think it's worth noting also that this protest actually didn't start in the capital. It started in Mashhad, which is one of the largest cities in the country. And that was the starting point, and then it spread to other cities in the country. But we never really saw that kind of mobilization or that kind of violence at all in the capital during the entire time. And I would say within the first 3 to 4 days, once the Revolutionary Guard and the Intelligence Ministry came into the scene and decided to prevent this from spreading, it actually went away quite quickly. And also, the most important thing, I think, was the internet shutting off within 24 hours that these riots broke out. By Saturday evening, we started noticing that our mobile phones no longer had internet. And then everything slowed down, and by the evening, it was an all-out blackout in the country. And that is something that's very rare. It hasn't happened here before. And it was a very, very specific decision that was made. It wasn't just made by the Information Minister or the Interior Ministry. It was made by a specific organization that is called the Supreme National Security Committee. And they are tasked with serious issues, making very important decisions. It's headed by the President, Hassan Rouhani, as well as the head of the Judiciary and the Speaker of Parliament. And their decisions are actually, the final say after they make decisions is approved by the Supreme Leader. So this group has a tremendous amount of power and decides what direction the country goes in domestically, as well as when it comes to Iran's foreign policy and also its nuclear program. So there are a lot of different elements at play, but I think the most surprising decision was the internet blackout.
And Dorsa, to that point, because of the internet blackout, it was so difficult and still is really to figure out what is happening on the ground and what the realities are. So I want to bring up this tweet, Dorsa. I'll give this to you, actually, Negar, based on what Dorsa was saying. Amin here on Twitter says, watch the videos which have been shared by #Iranian protesters. You cannot find someone saying, please make the gasoline cheaper. They all say they don't want this regime anymore. So talk to us about what you're seeing and what you were hearing on why people were out in the streets. Was it really the fuel increase, the fuel price increase, or was that just the spark to underlying discontent?
Just to add to what Dorsa was saying, this decision wasn't just made by the administration, it was made by all different factions, the highest echelons of power in the entire state. So it's not just one side of the political system. And it was definitely ignited by the hike in fuel price. Like Dorsa said, on a weekend you wake up and it's tripled. But then it quickly turned political. The slogans become political, whereas economy is essentially political, because if you see the mismanagement of the government, if you see high corruption within different factions, all the way to the top of the state, it just adds to the anger, and people feel like the economic misery, the crisis that they're in is actually part of the way the country is being ruled, which is very political. That's why we hear very radical slogans on the street. It's actually not the first time we're hearing them. This has been a continuation of the end of 2017, 2018. There were series and series of protests in multiple cities across Iran. But what's new, as Dorsa said, is the internet shutdown. There had been intermittent shutdown of internet in areas where there are protests, on mobile phones or things like that, but this complete blackout of the entire country, home and phone, is just a very terrible sign of basically not wanting the news of this to get out, and it was semi-successful.
Let me show you, and you can listen to Iran's communication minister. He makes an apology and explains why the internet was shut off in Iran. Have a look, have a listen.
The heavy responsibility of maintaining peace and security of the country is on the shoulders of top security bodies. At the beginning of the unrest, the decision to limit the internet was taken to ensure peace for the society and the people, and then it was delivered to internet operators. I should apologize on my behalf for all the problems you have been through during this period, on my behalf and as a member of the government and the ruling system.
Mustafa, how do you limit the internet? How does that happen?
Well, let me correct a number of mistakes in here. First, about the internet, the media personnel, news agencies, they were, as well as media outlets, they were not disconnected. They had the internet, first of all. And very fast, the Iranian administration of President Rouhani tried hard to bring back a number of centers online, like a number of academic centers in each cities, as well as some sectors that vitally needed the net, like for supply and so forth. But importantly, my second point is some people are trying hard in order to exonerate President Rouhani's administration, projecting the blame on everyone in this establishment. That's not the case, since I have lots of documents and information about this as a journalist, and I know that President Rouhani, as I said before, everyone is supporting a reduction of subsidies or targeted subsidies through cash handouts.
Do you think I can bring you back on topic? Because it was something that I was really curious about, and you as a journalist would be able to appreciate this. How do you limit the internet?
About this.
Yeah, but you keep saying, let me just do this, and I'm really curious, because we only have a certain amount of time. Yeah. How do you limit the internet in Iran? How do you do that?
Yeah. First of all, everyone was brought back. I mean, the net, the mobile data, as well as the
It's
Wi-Fi,
okay if you don't want to answer it, but I just would like to get an answer if possible.
Fine.
How do you limit the internet in Iran?
Why not? Well, this is something that you need to ask the officials, and not me. They have a very complicated system.
Okay, so you don't know. All right.
Really, because I'm not an IT guy, first of all. Let me explain a little about that. That was President Rouhani, actually, who chose the timing, who chose, actually, the manner of its implementation. He had a number of other options to earn the same amount of money that he plans to earn through rationing petrol. He could have done, a lot of other things, including, for example, according to data and plans that had been presented to him, making petrol engine
Mustafa, you're confusing me, because we've moved on to the internet and the internet limitation that's happened over the last couple of days, and now it's beginning to come back again.
Because there are a lot of people that are trying to do so. I'm sorry about that, but there are many people who are trying to clean President Rouhani of this wrong move. And I don't know why, because there are facts on the ground that provide us with this very simple fact that it was President Ghani.
Okay, I'm going to just put that on pause for a moment. Malika, can you move us on a little bit?
Of course,
Thanks.
because we are an internet-savvy show and we rely on the internet to power us. This was the number one thing that people wanted us to know about Iran. So just want to share a few tweets from people who asked us to cover this. Aya is one of them, who said, at the time, this is November 20th, the internet blackout in Iran has been going on for almost 100 hours. Coverage would put pressure on the government to turn it back on. Maximus says the shutdown has created an echo chamber inside Iran in order to prevent the news of a violent crackdown on protesters from getting out. But I want to share with our audience this graphic because this will show you exactly what it looked like. So this from netblocks.org updates 65 hours after Iran implemented a near total internet shutdown. Some of the last remaining networks are now being cut and connectivity to the outside world has fallen further to 4%. You can see this here. This is November 19th. Now we got a comment from someone who works at this organization on what it's like now. He's actually the executive director at NetBlocks. Here's what he told the stream.
It's been almost 2 weeks now since Iran cut off the internet, switching off connectivity for an 80 million population. It's been a very serious incident, both technically and socially. We've seen through our observatory at NetBlocks that the government has used multiple techniques to switch people off. You see filtering, you see total shutdowns, and this is still carrying on at some scale throughout parts of the country. We've seen parts of the capital come online, but mobile connectivity has been really low. So really it's about trying to silence people and limit information and how that information reaches the outside world. Iran is highly dependent on technology and on the internet, so there is pressure to bring it back on, but that's balanced against the authorities' needs to suppress these protests.
So Negar, I know that you had some connectivity. You were able to connect to some of your family and friends back in Iran, but what does this mean on a wider scale? What did the shutdown mean for people in the first place?
Well, we heard from people inside Iran saying it feels like they're suffocated, it feels like they're in prison, it feels like they're screaming but nobody can hear them, and it went on for quite a long time. I mean, we can talk about the economics behind the fuel high price forever, but that's not what the story is anymore. It moved way beyond that. Everyone within the administration is in agreement that that was the wrong move at the wrong time. But then what happened during these protests, I mean, some comparisons were made with austerity measures in other countries and protests, but you have over 140 people dead, as Amnesty International has put the death toll right now, probably even higher. Very violent. Thousands of people have been arrested. 7,000 people, one member of parliament has said, that have been arrested. And just from the very small number of images, videos, and photos that have come out, we see very brutal crackdown. In some instances, security forces directly shooting at protesters, or just violence happening in addition to all the vandalism that went on and the anger that was on the street. But this number of deaths and this much crackdown in just 1 week is very, even unprecedented in Iran.
Dorsa, I'm just looking at some of the reporting that you did for us on Al Jazeera, and it's quite difficult that blackout time when we couldn't necessarily see the videos. All the videos are now popping up, and then we have to work out which ones we can verify, which ones we can't. But in that time, what can you tell us happened in that time when we had limited access to what was happening in Iran?
Well, it was very difficult for us to even do our jobs in those circumstances. Not only did we have limited internet access, we were restricted in our movements as well. They say in those circumstances it's for our own security. And we really choose not to venture too far away from the office because we don't know what the restrictions are at any given moment. So we mainly stay within our offices and rely on state television and other official news channels to do the reporting. And since we can't really verify any of the events, the protests or the riots, we try to find a balance in between what we hear from the official channels here and what we hear from those unofficial channels outside of Iran, where people send their alleged firsthand accounts of what happens at these protests and riots. So we try to present both sides and figure out sort of a happy medium, if you will, in the middle somewhere. But really, it's very, very difficult. It's hard for anybody to verify these videos at any given moment anywhere in the world. I think that's just a given, the nature of social media. There were images that were allegedly from, 5 years ago, from 10 years ago, rioting that took place in the past. There were allegations that some of the social media footage was coming from Iraq, the protests there. Again, it's very difficult for us to verify that kind of information. All we can do is really try and present a picture of what is happening where we are, and that is the capital. And we spoke to people in the streets on a few occasions during that first week, just to get their opinion about what they thought, how this price hike would affect their daily life.
Sure.
And I think it was interesting that we heard from the president, Hassan Rouhani, on that Sunday about the reason he gave for doing this. And he even acknowledged that it was a very difficult decision for his government, but given the sanctions that this country finds itself under, they didn't have a choice. They had to do something because they were going to run out of money. They had to find a way to increase the budget, the income for the government, and to try and help nearly 60 million Iranians that are living below the poverty line. That was the explanation given by this government.
May I jump in?
Mustafa, go ahead.
May I jump in? Oh no, that's the wrong understanding of what President Hassan Rouhani said. Rouhani has been claiming that they are not going to make any kind of revenue through this new scheme. He has stressed that somewhere around 31,000 tons would be the earning, the estimates show actually, and every real of it would be given to the lower classes of the society. So this plan is basically not related to the sanctions directly, but of course, as sanctions make it harder, make life harder for the lower class society, President Hassan Rouhani has come up with a scheme, as he says and claims, to help the poor. That's the target of these cash handouts that they say they would give to the public, and they've started giving out to the public. But this is not something that's supposed to have any kind of reference for President Rouhani. That's what he claims. Actually.
All right, thank you for weighing. Thank you for weighing in there. We're right at the end of the show, Mustafa. So do excuse me. I just want to get one more comment from Nigar, which is after all of this time, the violence, the protesting, the internet being limited. The other end of that, what is the fallout? What is happening right now?
Well, it seems like the actual unrest has been wrapped up, is going to be wrapped up with the crackdown that we see, but the grievances are not going away. This is something that we saw 2 years ago last year, and it's probably going to continue if the economic situation doesn't change, if the political situation, the corruption, the mismanagement, and also the economic sanctions from the outside, none of this changes. These grievances are not going to go away, and people are probably just going to be more angry.
So you mentioned the grievances aren't going to go away. We have a question on YouTube from Elizabeth who says, who benefits from gas prices being tripled? Why won't the government reverse that decision, especially since the people are protesting against it? Do you actually think the government will reverse that decision? Can they? Because this is something that other world bodies had been asking for, recommending that they put this into place.
IMF, economists, even environmentalists, and it's still subsidized. The hike price is also still subsidized, but I don't think it's going to change. The government has promised to take the money that they were going to save from the subsidies and then hand it as cash handouts, part of it, to the lower income parts of the society. Apparently some of that has already started to millions of Iranian families, but I don't think it's going to translate to the actual number that people are going to lose with the tripling of the price.
And then just very briefly, you have family, obviously, in Iran. And when you talk to them, when you reach out to them, how are they feeling right now?
Well, my friends and family mostly live in Tehran, so they've been away, as Dorsa said, from the heart of the unrest and the violence. But it's just the internet shutdown was something that affected everyone. And not only us from the outside, but even Iranians inside Iran were not quite aware of what's happening within the country because of the internet shutdown, which is also interesting. But now it's like slowly coming out, the images. And
Thank you,
videos.
Nigar. Thank you, Dorsa. Thank you, Mustafa. We really appreciate you being on the stream today, helping us understand the most recent Iran protests. As of the time we have, thanks for watching. See you online.